distinguished guests, brothers and sisters, ladies and gentlemen.
What's up, family? My name is Brother Ray. We'd like to welcome everyone to the BK History Club. Before we start, I want the people that came down and live to give yourself a great big hand. Also, I want the people on Zoom to give yourself a great big hand. We meet every other Wednesday in honor of William Mackey Jr., Amos Wilson, Brother Gil Noble, El-Haj Malik El-Shabazz, the late great attorney Alton Maddox, Louis Ray Rivera, Brother Assar, Minister Khalid, Dr. Ben, Dr. Clark, Ivan Van Sertima, Miss Leola Maddox, in honor of Miss Leola in the United African Movement, who drove an old car moderately, and she used to come from Teaneck all the way to the United African Movement because she believed in bringing people together. And she ate her dinner there. And no matter how cold it was, she always, that's how dedicated she was. So we never want to forget these warriors like Miss Leola Maddox. And in this day of Zoom and this and that, we didn't have it, and we came down no matter how cold it was, no matter what. So in honor of Leola Maddox and all, Runoko Rashidi, all the historians, Dr. Ben, Dr. Clark, who they could have drunk the Kool-Aid, as Dr. Lewis said. They could have took the money. They could have went the Gates route. Skip, who called them pseudo scholars on orders from his overseers, and he couldn't carry their bags. Talking about Dr. Ben and Mackey and them. They went beyond the call of duty. So we want to thank them. So we're going to move the cameras over to the Amos collection. And these books are to help African World Info Systems. Brother Sababu, Blueprint for Black Power. Amos's last redone book by Sababu, The Psychology of Self-Hatred and Self-Defeat toward a Reclamation of the African Mind. The classic, Black on Black Violence, the psychodynamic of black self-annihilation in service of white domination. And you can say what you want to say. We are still being dominated by white folks. White folks are still controlling every move that we make. Of course, you see it all over the globe where they're listening. We are controlled. Issues of manhood in black and white. Awakening the natural genius of black children. Another classic by Amos, The Falsification of African Consciousness. And we have a lot of falsies out there. African-centered consciousness versus the New World Order. And S.K. Damiano, Distorted Truths and the Bastardization of African Cosmology. So we have these books from African World Info Systems. And my last one, in honor of Louis Ray Rivera. And Louis Ray, who would come down here when Professor Mackey left us. Right. Louis Ray would come down here and speak. In his numerous books, this is one of them, Jazz in Jail. Okay. And me, God bless Brother Assar, Brother Coven, Brother Cal, Louis Ray would come down and speak, and he was the noted scholar, along with Dr. Lewis. And he would speak for an hour and a half. He would speak, and then we would walk him home. And he lived on Jefferson, and he would speak for another hour and a half. And that's only a couple of blocks. And I miss him so much. He come out of Marcy Project.
Marcy Project, too.
Louis Ray Rivera. We never want to forget Louis Ray. So I have some other books. This is for the public and the listening audience to understand. The books is out here. So I'm going to start off with, in honor of Cynthia McKinney. This is in my personal opinion, the only one that cared about the people of the state of Georgia, and on orders from higher ups, white folks. They ran Cynthia McKinney out when she spoke up against the Bushes. When China sneezes, from the global economic lockdown to the global political crisis, Cynthia McKinney went beyond the call of duty. And you remember when Donald Trump threw the toilet paper at Puerto Rico and called it a S-hole country. And everybody went crazy, but they didn't know that the higher ups and the ruling class in Puerto Rico took the money. But it's a reason why these countries, when somebody from America calls them S-hole countries. Well, Cynthia McKinney wrote a book, How the U.S. Creates S-hole Countries, with the CIA, Smedley Butler. War is a racket. So those books we had. And the state of Georgia would not be in the situation it is now if Cynthia McKinney was still there. And them clowns they got down there now are full of it. Warnock and all of them. And they ran the best sister in the world out. If anybody thinks that the Jews are not running South Africa, you're out of your mind. Blacks do not run South Africa. The Unspoken Alliance, Israel's secret relationship with apartheid South Africa. Another book. People are running around here talking about the Epstein files and trying to blame this and that. Well, let me explain to you. This Caucasian woman, Whitney Webb, Volume 1 and Volume 2. You do not want to see who was at them parties. They running around talking about Donald Trump, and if they didn't bring it up before when they had him downtown years ago, it don't mean nothing now. If you really, they better be quiet, because if you want to know who was at them parties, this young lady, Whitney Webb, will tell you. And a lot of names you do not want to come up, because it's starting to come up now who was at them parties. And I'm going to tell you something right now. Regular New Yorkers wouldn't even be allowed to get any place near. Big profile people. So you better hope, get that book and you'll find out about the Epstein files. Dr. Lyndon LaRouche, everywhere you go, thanks to the Democratic Party, thanks to them bums. Medical marijuana, when the British got the Irish strung out, when the British do the Chinese opium drug wars, where they had the drug dens down in the Lower East Side, Chinatown. See, they only tell you black folks were strung out on drugs. They only tell you black people was criming. Well, the Chinese was criming and shooting morphine and in opium dens in them little side streets off Canal Street in the 5 Points. Well, you can thank the British. And now you got the medical marijuana phenomenon, where everybody's smoking it. White people selling it, you can't do nothing about it. The youth is smoking it. Well, you can thank Lyndon LaRouche for bringing this stuff out. And the man behind it is George Soros. Don't get mad at me. It's in the book, Dope Incorporated. And it was one of the substances that destroyed the Black Power movement. From 50-cent caps to any kind of hope we had with us. When that dope came in, it destroyed us the same. And how did the Asians pull themselves out? How did the Irish pull themselves out? And we have yet to come through. Because after the dope came the crack. After the crack, now you got the fentanyl. But see, they so vicious, they even getting their own crystal meth. They don't care nothing about nobody. They're killing their own. Dope Incorporated. I will never forgive them for legalizing that garbage. And you can't do nothing about it. The gangs of New York, the Crips, the Bloods, the Nestars, and all them gangs ain't got nothing on the Bowery Boys, the Dead Robins. If you get the gangs of New York, Herbert Asbury tell you about the 400 to 500 roving gangs that was in the 5 Points. The Irish mobsters, the Italian mobsters, the gangs, the filth. And now we got an influx. See, America cleaned out their jails and sent everybody over here. And they formed gangs. Now they got the Venezuelan gangs and all these people that they let in. But if you really want to get the history of the gangs in the 5 Points, you get this book. And the Irish did not like the way Hollywood portrayed them in this movie called The Gangs of New York. They were very upset about it. And you got to remember, they hung us from the lampposts on 42nd Street and 5th Avenue at the Children's Orphanage. And it talks about this in The Gangs of New York. So Hollywood, how did Neil Gerbler, an empire of their own. How the Jews invented Hollywood. They invented all kinds of scenarios of them coming to America in rags with one suitcase as Donald Trump's father came through. And I got the book right here. And Professor Mackey would always say, when you want to learn about somebody, you read the books. So the Jews invented, and it was basically something that the government allowed them, and they destroyed our image from Birth of a Nation to the Klan. And they're still doing it today, destroying the image of black people. And they got black folks down with it now. And Neil Gerbler tells you how they built the movie studios and controlled the distribution to destroy an image of the people. Zukov, Samuel Goldwyn, MGM, Metro Goldwyn Mayo. And in the end, they put Metro Goldwyn Mayo in a back room. So these Jews that invented Hollywood and invented events that never happened. Oh, and the nightlife that never happened. Neil Gerbler. Another book, The Synagogues of Satan, A Brief History of Jewish World Domination. Another con artist, The Manchurian Candidate, The Manufacturing of a President, the CIA insertion of Barack Hussein Obama. And it's another book by Dexter Hartley on Obama. You want to really read what's going on with this guy? And he all over the place now, coming back out in the woodwork. Get The Manufacturing of the President, the CIA insertion of Barack Hussein Obama into the presidency. And people can't deal with it. The Man Behind the Curtain, George Soros, the lifetime and trading secrets of the world's greatest investor, how he made his millions, stealing the gold out of people's mouths. Hungarian Jew. The Man Behind the Curtain and the Greatest Investor, unauthorized autobiography. And if you want to know about investing and what he controls, the Democratic Party, he controls them hook, line, they all work for him. And a lot of the information is being exposed. He's being exposed. So you get the books on individuals, and then you find out how dirty they were. We just had somebody just left us, Dick Cheney, Tricky Dick. Murderer. Murderer, killed millions of Iraqis in the Bush dynasty. And when Cynthia McKinney asked the questions, they ran out of town, AIPAC. Booker T. Washington, the making of a president. Booker T. Washington and Africa, the makers of a Pan-Africanist. A lot of people think, oh, Booker T was some kind of sellout, but according to Tyreen Wright, oh, Booker T was a bad person, and he created how to make bricks. We have not a black company that know how to make bricks, that build everything. So I want to thank Tyreen Wright. He was not the person who y'all think. Io Camachi, the irritated genie, in his 1-2 War on the Horizon, and he's running for public office of the 41st District in Baltimore, Maryland. Jews are the problem, and the second blockbuster, Jews are the problem in the psychology of the Jew. We want to thank Io on these publications, and they're readily available. In honor of Dr. Ben, black man of the Nile and his family, and Dr. Ben left orders. And according to my sources, only 2 people are really following the orders that he made out, and one of them will be speaking tonight. And that's Dr. Fred Monderson. All right. And Dr. Arthur Lewis. A lot of the folks did not carry out the orders of Dr. Ben and Dr. Clark. So Black Man in the Nile tells you how these great dynasties, how they built the pyramids, these great civilizations. Not a mistake. There wasn't too many computers, so we want to thank Dr. Ben. And if you want to go back and see what happens, you get this book. Queen Nzinga, a warrior of Angola, and the Portuguese did not want to negotiate with this fierce warrior. And the brothers that was with her formed their own bench. And she sat on there and negotiated hard with the Portuguese. And if the sisters read about Queen Nzinga, you won't be able to do what you're doing to the sisters today. Any black woman out there, you better get this book and read about this sister. This sister was fierce.
All right now.
The same way Winnie Mandela. Any kind of traitor that came in to Winnie Mandela's camp in South Africa, she put a tie over the guy and burnt him up because she knew he was no good. So when you read about Queen Nzinga, they can't pull nothing over your head. Thanks, African Echoes, Trust Graham, for bringing this book out. African slavery in Latin America and the Caribbean. Don't think that slavery just happened in America. Do not come to America crying and talking about the African American or now the FBA's on their pursuit of reparations. If you didn't do no fighting in Brazil, if you didn't do no fighting in Mexico, if you didn't do no fighting in Jamaica for reparations. African slavery in Latin America. A majority of the slaves was dropped in Brazil. So don't come to America going against the people here who's fighting if you didn't do no fighting over there. Thank you, African Echoes. African or American? Black identity and political activism in New York in 1784 to 1861. And you want to see some dues that was being paid? Look what was happening to us in the 1700s. Donald Trump's family came in the 1800s with a suitcase, like Dr. Lewis said, with rags in one suitcase. We was already here. The Destruction of Black Civilization by Chancellor Williams. And when Chancellor Williams went beyond the call of duty, and he would tell you every mistake we made as a people in them great dynasties. How the Arab slave trade. The Arab slave trade was first, the European slave trade was second. And he tells you the mistakes we made. How we wasn't together back then, and how we might not get it together here. The land, the country of the land of the black was 2,000 men. The Moors ruled Europe for 700 years. They were African. 700, 900, they were African. They civilized it. Thank you, Chancellor. The next time I see somebody with a reparations hearing and they don't bring out without sanctuary on the hangings in Mississippi, on the postcards, what they did to us, the beatings, how they put you in a boiling pot of hot sugar oil and roasted you. And they showed you a picture of that in the Ken Norton movie, Mandingo. And this is Hollywood. And then when we ask for something, they got to have another study. And then you got to have the nerve to have black folks sitting up in there, like they making some decisions. But when anybody else asks for it, they give it to them. The pictures is here, so they don't have this book without sanctuary. And even in Rhodesia, when Cecil Rhodes, they cut your leg off, they cut your arm off, they cut your hand off. What he did. In Somalia, what they did. And you're crying crocodile tears for somebody else. You're out of your mind. The postcards. And when we ask for something, they want to have another study. Causes unknown. The epidemic of sudden death syndrome, why these young athletes is dropping dead all of a sudden from heart attacks. Edward Down. The young people. The ultimate vaccine timeline. And Robert Kennedy, Children's Health Defense, just initiated where they want the ingredients of all vaccines to be labeled. And this is a timeline. It goes back into the 1800s, the whole history of any vaccine. I want to thank the Children's Health Defense. The Pfizer papers. They forced Pfizer to come out with the information. And Pfizer didn't want to do it. They wanted to keep it for 75 years. Well, what happened? When they told you to take something, you wouldn't have no job or nothing. No stamps, no food stamps, nothing. And they run around crying now. What happens to the body? And Pfizer wanted to withhold this information. I don't know how the Moderna pharmaceutical giant Moderna was able to stop the publication of their book, the Moderna papers. But it hasn't came out, so something must be in there. Down the CO-19 rabbit hole. This is a person that wrote a book, The Cancer Industry, Crimes, Conspiracy, and the Death of His Mother. Mark Sloan. And on up, Dr. Scott Whitaker, Medicine, the causes and solutions disease to the medical sins that are killing us. Dr. Scott out of Decatur, Georgia. Capitalism on a Ventilator, The Money Made. Dr. Colleen Herbert, Neither Safe Nor Effective. The Evidence Against the CO. The Medical Pharmaceutical Killing Machine. Fact finders that could save our lives. And also the classic Children's Health Defense, Robert Kennedy, the real Anthony Fauci. And that's why he still has to walk around with numerous bodyguards because of what he did. And once you read the book, during the AIDS crisis, you're going to find out the dastardly stuff he did while we lost people during that time. Family members. Ladies and gentlemen, this is some community events. Thorough Black Talk, Tad, Keisha, Ashe, Brother Black, Sister Mama, Sister Brooke. And it's another brother that's on there that's getting into the reparations phenomenon. and they going at it hard. So I want to thank Keisha and them. With Thorough Black Talk, it comes on tomorrow at 8 o'clock on YouTube. And I forgot the other guy's name, but they are really pushing it about family history and reparations. So they have a lot of organizations in the Freedmen's Bureau, the brothers from the Freedmen's Bureau, and they're going at it hard. And you actually got people not from America actually going against them. And they wasn't even fighting where they came from. It's one of the most disgusting events I've ever seen. Blog Talk Radio, Sister Empress, the Million Women's March. They come on Saturday at 10 o'clock on YouTube. Brother Lumumba, Brother Moses, El Pollinator. And they had a brother there from Chicago that was on this Saturday. And I asked him 3 pertinent questions. That the brothers in the gangs are putting their differences aside because they allow the Venezuelan gangs and all the migrants to come into the black communities of Chicago, and they tearing them up, and the brothers are putting their differences aside. And how the Obama library done went through the black community tearing it down to build this library. And he laid it down. And he talked about the current mayor and what's happening in Chicago, where the people from Chicago was getting nothing. So I hope them brothers in the gangs put their differences aside, because why did they putting them all in the black community? Darren Ayo Kamati, Sankofa Revolutionary Radio, WSYP 95.1 FM. That comes on Mondays. Dr. Haru from 9 to 10 with herbal leaf extract and his health questions, bad show. And then from 10 to 11, Ayo Kamati, the irritated genie who's running for office in the 41st District in Baltimore. And you can come on and answer many questions. So that's Sankofa Revolutionary Radio. Big ups to Anthony Mohammed. Also, State of the City. Darren Muhammad, Saturday show on YouTube, Instagram, Muhammad Takamet and Darren State of the City. The 12 o'clock program Saturday is unbelievable, and it's on Instagram. So we want to give big ups to State of the City, Darren, Baltimore. Every Tuesday at 7 o'clock, Dr. Aleem, he was on yesterday kicking it live on Calfani Radio. Dr. Aleem is giving up some good information. Also, African Echoes, Trust Graham, and the African Echo Study Group out of Newark. They're doing the psychology of self-hatred and self-defeat toward the reclamation of the African mind, and then Saturday they give you a double header. The Know Thyself Study Group, they're doing Chancellor Williams, and you will find out firsthand on the mistakes we made. So we want to thank them 2 organizations. The Semotap organization then is continuing its fight against Netflix with that disgusting cartoon stigma of good times, where once again Hollywood just have a good time destroying our image. And also, the UNIA is trying to reprogram us. So we want to thank President Michael Duncan and Raymond Dugal on the UNIA. Race First. And they also have the store. The Rock is on 13205 Merrick Boulevard. It's a mini Jetro's. And it's excellent, and all the people who work there is good. So I want to thank the UNIA and its effort to reprogram not only myself, but everybody that mind is all messed up. And when you go there and spend your money, you feel real good because you don't get disrespected. So those are just some community events, information that comes out that the BK History Club gives. And for the listening audience to participate in and get the knowledge. Because whatever it is, knowledge. So ladies and gentlemen, we have our noted scholar who has been here before, and he's carrying out the messages of Dr. Ben and Sonny Carson. And I read his articles for years before I met him in the Daily Challenge, when the Daily Challenge was 25 cents. So we want to give a great big hand who's bringing out a lot of information on Africa. He's been there numerous times. And he keeps up the name of Sonny Carson and his family. Because if he don't, nobody ever mentions Sonny Carson no more. And his book, Sonny Carson's book, should be a must-read in the public school system, so that people don't join the gangs and get trapped off. So, without further ado, we're going to give a great big hand to our keynote speaker tonight. And you can view all the lectures from the BK History Club on YouTube under BK History Club. And you could go over them, come on down. Without further ado, give a great big hand to Dr. Frederick Monderson.
Hotep family, hotep, hotep, hotep.
Hotep, how y'all doing? Live from Trinidad.
I have some coffee.
How many sugars you want? One sugar, two sugar?
No sugars. My wife is watching.
You want cream up?
Yeah, cream. Yeah. I can't have any sugar when my wife is watching. Ladies and gentlemen, good evening, and thank you for being a part of this wonderful presentation. Thank you for giving me some of your listening ear. It is important that this struggle of educating and edifying our people continue. I'm happy that Brother Ray was able to explain that what my mission is really, along with Dr. Clark, Dr. Lewis, as we fulfill some of Dr. Ben Johannen's admonition. I wanted, in a way, to rival Brother Ray's wonderful presentation of the great body of knowledge that you should own. I had the privilege of entering a young gentleman's home, and I was astonished to see about 30 sets of sneakers in the hallway, half of them in boxes, and half of them already perhaps used. I didn't see any books. I'm reminded of that time I was on Atlantic Avenue in Brooklyn, and I was sitting in a printer's office, and a young man came in and he wanted to mail a box. And the young lady said to him, well, you have to take out the contents of that box and put it into this box. And when he did, lo and behold, a beautiful pair of sneakers. And I said, wow, how much did that cost? He said, I paid $600 for it on Amazon. I'm trying to sell it for $400 on eBay. And he said, in fact, I'm going to sell all my sneakers. And I thought, wow. Only one person can wear a pair of sneakers. Even if he leaves the sneakers for his son, maybe they don't have the same size foot. But how much that cost? But a book will cost anywhere from $15 to $20 to $30 to $40. And then several people in the family, especially the young, can read it. So I wanted to big up Brother Ray Ray for presenting, as usual, that great body of knowledge that is, in most cases, unknown to some of the listening audience. What I like about being in this particular position here is that it's about presenting information. I remember in a previous session, Dr. Lewis had presented some information, and a young man asked the question, well, what do we do? And Dr. Lewis said, my job is to present information. You have to analyze what I present. So what happens here is that most of the people who come here, they're allowed, they're privileged to say their speak, their version of the truth, or what is. It's up to you to make sense of what they're saying. You don't have to accept everything. Parse the knowledge. However, I would like to reassure you that what I bring is the real deal. Back in the day, let me get my bicycle because I can't ride too well without my bike, But I'm a student of Dr. Clark and Dr. Ben Johannan. In fact, I gave Dr. Ben his name. Now, you figure that out. Anyway, Dr. Clark, when I wrote for the Daily Challenge, but Ray Ray had mentioned this. This is back in February 11, 2008. Dr. Clark said, or asked, who's betraying us today? So you got to figure that one out. Thank you, sir. Okay. During the pandemic, I did this beautiful illustration of Queen T. She was wife of Amenhotep III, 18th dynasty. And here she is again. And I'm going to put these two as part of the cover of my next book, which is about to release within the next couple of weeks. I'm not sure if I had shown you this, but this is when I held a tribute. This was the third annual tribute that I held for Dr. Ben in Karnak Temple. On the YouTube, I've done a 12-part series on Karnak. But as far as I know, I'm the only person who has spoken in an official capacity in Karnak Temple in the name of Dr. Joseph Ben Johannan. And this was the third one. And when I went back the next year, in 2019, with my other son, they said, hold on, we got to shut you down. I didn't know why, but nevertheless, the work continues. In fact, I had done an earlier tribute to Dr. Ben in Harlem, at Dr. Ben's house. This is back in 2015, and it was entitled, Let's Liberate the Temple. Okay? Back in 2000, when I was writing for the Daily Challenge, I wrote over 1,000 pieces for them. They never paid me a dime. But when I was young, I wanted to get my name in the newspaper. I started writing, and then I continued writing and writing and writing. Miss Elsie Richardson said to me one day, after I'd written 19 letters, 8,000 pages to O.J. Simpson when he was in prison, she said, Monderson, you better start copywriting your stuff because you can see it in other people's works. Anyway, in 2000, I wrote this tribute to Amun-Ra who we'll speak about tonight, but interestingly enough, Dr. Ben had written a letter to the Daily Challenge, and if you will permit me, I will share that letter with you. And it was a letter to the editor on March 1, 2000. He said, Dr. Ben Johanan, he said, today I recognize Brother Frederick Monderson as a stalwart in the field of Egyptological Nile Valley research. Fred Monderson has been a student of mine since 1972. He possesses many of my works in first edition that, with the deepest appreciation, I subsequently endorsed. Having read my books and traveled to Egypt, ancient Kemet, with me on several occasions, Brother Monderson has written nearly 400 pieces of African history and local social, political, community matters in your newspaper, to the Daily Challenge he wrote. They were published in your New York City's only black daily newspaper, the Daily Challenge. In this pyramid of black social consciousness, he has enlightened the black community on efficacy and significance of African history and culture. The Afro Times and New American newspapers were also vehicles in this undertaking. In manner reminiscent of my efforts, and with a style that I endorsed, Brother Monderson has borne the mantle, the torch of black enlightenment in New York with dignity and a revolutionary fervor that I admire. Years ago, on one of Dr. Lewis's dinners, honoring my efforts, I'm reminded of Fred Monderson's statement, Dr. Ben, as you move along life's paths and your vision becomes cloudy and you look for someone to pass the baton to, look for Brother Monderson, for I'll be there. On my tour of Egypt in the summer of 1997, participants were given an assignment in Karnak Temple. Mr. Monderson's assignment had been to locate and report on the name of Ramses III in that enclosure and elsewhere on the tour. While somewhat disappointed with the reports or lack thereof from the other students, I was impressed with Brother Monderson's studiousness and attention to the historical detail of his assignment. Ramses III. My response was, everybody failed except Mr. Monderson. Well, perhaps you and you. There is a tape recording of this statement. The author of several books on ancient Kemet Egypt, consistent with the dynamism of African historiographic reconstruction, I endorse the efforts of Fred Monderson, outlining continued research and his endeavors as a tour guide to the land of ancient Kemet. It is my firmest belief he will continue to educate and enlighten our people regarding the strengths, significance, and utility of the ancient Nile Valley heritage. With respect and warm affection, I close that, and he signs that Dr. Joseph A. Ben Johanan is a researcher, black African nationalist, author, lecturer, tour guide, elder in Harlem, New York. So the letter and the tribute to Amun-Ra is reminiscent of what I've learned from Dr. Ben, who showed me the way. Of course, there's another scholar that I admire greatly. He was Dr. Leonard James. He was my first mentor. As I said, I have to admire Brother Ray for giving permission to speak your truth. I am a follower of Reverend Sharpton. I disagree with him on a number of occasions. I remember once, some years ago, one of the reporters had asked Reverend Sharpton, how come you don't disavow Minister Louis Farrakhan? Sharpton, quick wit, as he always said, well, I have a lot of disagreements with Cardinal Dolan, but nobody's asking me to disavow Cardinal Dolan. So until they ask me to disavow Cardinal Dolan, then I will think about Anyway, so I was a part of the march on Wall Street on August of this year for draw attention to some of the Doge misfitication. He asked that we use our power to do good. And that economic justice is civil rights. Again, why we march for freedom, fairness, and security. We were a part of the NEA, National Education Association, and we were fighting for a better future for our children. So he was down with that, I was all for it. Listen, if I see a black man in trouble, I'm coming to his assistance, right? I did that when I saw Michael Jackson in trouble. I wrote a book on Michael Jackson. When Mike Tyson was arrested, Sonny Carson said, hey, somebody need to write that boy and teach him some black history. So I wrote him 7 letters, and then I ended up writing this book of the 7 letters called 7 Letters to Michael Jackson, to Michael Tyson on ancient African history. Not about his issues. So then again, I don't care what they say, I saw what had happened to Barack Obama. I saw a black man in trouble, and I came to his assistance. I followed his administration from day one, the time he had the debate with Hillary Clinton, and I chronicled everything that happened. I wrote 4 books on Obama. The first one I wrote was Barack Obama, Master of Washington, D.C. Actually, the earlier book was called Obama Ready, Fit to Lead, which was a small book, much smaller than this. So this is Obama, Master, Washington, D.C. Then I wrote Obama, Master and Commander. Okay, Commander of the Forces. And then when it was all over, I wrote Obama, the journey completed, never promised a rose garden. So again, another black man in trouble, and I went to his assistance. Something happened this week that really astonished me, in that I have published, I got more than 50 books on Amazon. Of course, I challenge you, all of you, to ask yourself, how many of that 50 you got? Don't answer. Anyway, so I've been publishing on Amazon. But this week, I received a note that this book, Sonny Carson, The Final Triumph, has been rejected. It's out of print. How can it be out of print? The function that they serve is they'll print on demand. That is to say, if you want this book, you contact Amazon, I want that book, they'll print a copy and send it to you. So I didn't get a chance as yet to investigate what it meant. But there are some undertones and overtones about this book on Sonny Carson that I have to look into. And even some of you who are bold enough can contact Amazon and say, what's happening there? Perhaps, I don't know. So I was going to Egypt in May, and at the airport I met this young man, and he was taking some people, about half a dozen people or something like that. So I went over to him and said, do you have a book? He said, yeah. He took out his book, I purchased it. He said, well, look, it's $30, I'll give it to you for $25, you get $5 discount. I said, great. I haven't read the book as yet. Well, while we were in Egypt, and we happened to be staying in the same hotel, and at dinner, I had this book in my possession. It's called The Temple of Karnak. Okay, this is probably the only single English language version of the Temple of Karnak that it took 2,000 years to build. So therefore, if you as a guide taking people to Egypt, to Luxor, you're going to go to Karnak Temple, and this book becomes indispensable. You know, he said, well, I don't have any money right now, but so he lost the opportunity to have the contents of this book. By the same token, I've already mentioned Sematat, right? So I was at Sematat back in 2015 when Runoko Rashidi came out with the Van Sertima papers. And I was one of the people in the audience who bought that copy of that book to support the brother. But interestingly enough, he had this book here, which nobody's seen, right? And only within the last couple of weeks that I began really looking at this book. And this book is a treasure trove of African influence in Asia. Everything east of Egypt, east of Africa. And again, had I not taken the opportunity to purchase the book at the time, then I would have lost all of this.
What's
so
the
then,
name of that book?
It's called African History. So he's got about 300 different people's names and information with bibliography in this book. I don't think you could find it. Okay, I got perhaps the only copy. Blowing my own horn, now if you want to know who were the ancient Egyptians, I got it here for you. Okay, so you can get in on this. And in fact, two of my books that came out this summer, one of them is called Ancient Egypt Synthesis, where I put together a number of articles that I've written. It's full of images, and it must be added to your library. Much more significant, the second book that I published this summer, this one is called Kings and Commoners at Luxor Temple. As far as I know, it's the only single volume book on Luxor Temple. Years ago, back in the early 60s, a gentleman named, a symbolist named Shuala de Lupis did a 2-volume study of that book, of the temple, where he measured all of the columns, the floor, the walls, the illustrations, everything. But that is a voluminous 2-volume, maybe a 40-pound book collection, right? But again, the Temple of Luxor. The Temple of Luxor, there is no building on the face of the earth that corresponds to the Temple of Luxor. So if you go in there, what's in here is what you're going to see. You better hurry up and get these things, these treasures. Okay. I try to rival Brother Rere show and tell, so let me put a couple more things here. When I was on the community board, I served 30 years in the community board. I got a certificate of recognition from the board president for complete attendance, never missing a session for the entire year. I think that was in 2000. I must have mentioned Malafia Sante's 5-word letter to me. Well, Monderson, well done, because I had written the Afrocentric response to the invasion of Somalia, trying to find General Adid, which ended with the publication of the movie Black Hawk Down. So I wrote the Black response. This here is when I was a student at Oxford University in '76, my certificate, and then again when I was there in '81. So in fact, I've been investing in my education. So when I come to see you, I'm coming prepared because I'm here to deal. We must be careful of how information is presented to us. Right? For years I had a friend in Luxor, and he would take me about, and he took me into the Luxor Museum. The Luxor Museum consists of artifacts found in Luxor, Egypt. Right? And one of the most striking piece of artifact was illustrated in this image here. This is the god Amun-Ra, represented as he was in blackface, if you call it that, in the 18th dynasty during the time of Thutmose III. They do not permit photography in that museum because it's some of the choicest pieces. But I became friendly with the lady, Monderson, that she sent her assistant with guards to see that I take only one picture. So I have this image here. And why I brought it to you is that, okay, so I saw the title of this book and the imagery. Well, when I opened the book, this is what they're giving me, okay? Now, this is not what he looked like, but this is the presentation or the image that presented. And as Dr. Leonard James likes to say, the existential data contradicts the symbolic representation. So what is this? Is this? And you got to figure out, as I said earlier, we present information, you got to do your own analysis. So ladies and gentlemen, I just got, oh yeah, we just finished the election, but the day before the election, we used to call that Black Solidarity Day. So I wrote this piece back in 1997, which was, this is the mantra of the Black Solidarity Day celebration, okay? I remember there is the highest point in Washington, D.C., not building, but landmass, is a park that's been renamed the Malcolm X Park. And it has some photographs of people of that era. And you can see there was a procession of blacks with big afros marching in military formation coming out of the park. I can't remember the name, it's been renamed Malcolm X. But they were celebrating Black Solidarity Day when we were saying, don't shop, don't buy, come together, do something positive. Well, Monday passed, we didn't do that. Oh, it was the last week, I can't remember. But this is a reminder of the need for Black Solidarity. So those there were some of my presentations. I want to get into my topic today. Okay, so thank you very much so far. Let me wet the old whiskers. My topic this evening is called Creation in Ancient Egypt. You have to understand that, okay, let's go back to Dr. Ben, okay? Dr. Ben often told us, he said, when he was a youngster, very young, maybe in the first, what we would call 3K or pre-K today. And they took us, they said, okay, we're going to take you downtown to see the world's tallest building. And they took these youngsters downtown to see the world's tallest building, and it was a 3-story building. Then the family moved to Puerto Rico, and they practically went through the same experience, and they went downtown and they saw this 9-story building. Huh? Lo and behold, they moved to New York. And then they came, when coming to America, they encountered the Sears building, which was 105 stories. And what Dr. Ben broke that down to mean is that each one of these experiences is a different world that we lived in. So when it comes to creation, you have to understand that all people have what some people would like to call the myth of their creative or their creation experience, right? That is to say then that the Africans throughout the continent as well as Egypt have their own version of creation. So, I'm saying that the coalescing of cosmic elements and forces, aspects of cosmology and cosmogony, manifested in the primeval waters, generated the fundamental components that effectuated creation, with God's Ra, Atum, and Betah being the first movers, whose thoughts, speeches, or actions and deeds brought into being the cosmic reality we currently experience within the mineral, animal, plant, and human kingdoms of our existence. To this was added the philosophic, metaphysical, spiritual, divine essence evolving into not 4 but 5 kingdoms. That is to say, mineral, plant, animal, human, and then the divine kingdom combined to create 5 kingdoms in the worldview of these early Africans on the Nile Valley. Of course, this is not how the phenomenal cosmic order of our world was constructed according to Egyptian myth and belief systems. The enumeration is essentially not too different conceptually among other people along the Nile Valley and elsewhere in Africa. In addition to the above 3 created gods, we must also add Amun-Ra, Thoth, Khnum, and ultimately Osiris. The Book of the Dead is a principal source for creation and events of the afterlife where Osiris presides. Speaking of the idea where the Africans of Egypt practice monotheism, that's the belief in one God, Wallace Budge, in his book called From Fetish to God in Ancient Egypt, mentions Osiris, who in addition to several divinity manifestations, by the way, we had a fellow come here whose name is like Osiris, and he has all the paraphernalia that goes with the Osiris conception. I was unable to contact him about this evening. He was considered one God, that is to say, the highest divinity. In this, Budge refers to one incident in which he relates the words of one deceased individual, wherein he says, in the Book of the Dead, chapter 172, that is, the deceased, having died and gone to heaven and stood in the psychostasia, the judgment. I was in Philadelphia Museum in 1992, where they had a symposium on Egypt and Africa. And Dr. Malana Karenga, you remember him, the guy with guns or whatever. It was as if they were afraid of this guy's arrival. And one day, someone said to me, someone said, do you know who he is? Do you know? Anyway, but he spoke about the fear and trembling when you stood before your God at that final period of your life and had to determine whether you had lived according to the tenets of man. Okay, so he's saying that this one individual, this lady, in the Book of the Dead, the deceased says to Osiris, I pray thee, Lord of the gods, God one, top God, living in truth. The princess Nessie Kansu glorifies Amun-Ra, saying, August God, which came into being in primeval time, the great God living in truth, the first 9 gods who gave birth to the other 9 gods, the being in whom every God existed, one God, the creator of kings, which appeared when the earth took form in the beginning, whose birth is hidden, whose forms are manifest, whose germination cannot be known. But whether the God addressed we call Tanunan, that was a form of Ptah, or Ra, or Amun-Ra, or even Aten of Amenhotep IV, Akhenaten, the first revolutionary, is always the sun god, or his home the sun, which is in the mind of the worshipper. I mean, we're entering into the winter season where everything essentially symbolically dies until the spring when the flowers begin to bloom again and the sun brings life into the world. So these early Africans, unable to understand the phenomenon of their environment, saw the sun and all its power and glory and deified it, and they were thus called, like the Akiban, sun worshippers. So it is always the sun god or his home the sun, which is in the mind of the worshipper. Osiris is called God One, for he was the night sun. Again, you cannot go into a study of Egypt with your tablet, smartphone, TV, washing machine, refrigerator mentality. It's a different world. This is a world of Africans coming out of primeval times with a tabula rasa, which is a blank slate. I was a school teacher, and at the end of the day, the kids would fight to who would wash board, so that tomorrow morning when I came in, we had a nice clean board for me to write on. So the clean board, empty space, is a tabula rasa. So these theologians of that time were crafting ideas as they saw it. And we now, in order to understand that, you got to do a triple back reverse somersault. It's not easy. So do not project your own prejudices into understanding what it is that you're looking at and you're seeking to understand, to get the knowledge from. So additionally, Dr. Budge explained, he said that the monotheism of the Egyptian may even be compared to that of the Hebrews and the Arabs. The Hebrews proclaim Yahweh to be the one. Deuteronomy 6:4, the Lord, He is God, there is none else beside Him. Deuteronomy 6:35. See now that even I am He, and that there is no God with me. Deuteronomy 32:39. I am the Lord, there is none else. There is no God besides me. Isaiah 45:5. The Mohammedans say, Allah is one, the eternal, Al-Samadi. He begotten not, neither is He begotten, and there is not anyone like Him. The Quran and Surah. The titles and epithets applies to this one God prove that He was believed to be self-proclaimed, self-existent, almighty, eternal, omniscient, and omnipresent, just, righteous, merciful, good, and gracious. He ruled the universe, which He created by means of His ministers or messengers or angels, who obeyed His decree and carried out His works. Obeyed His decree. You know, we're coming to when God Ra said that He created the laws. And He said, I obey my law. It's interesting that people today create laws but don't obey the laws. But this great God, He made the laws. And He said, you know, I'm standing in line like everybody else. So this is food for thought. This, what it's called, the All God, that is the one God that has all the powers. He got everybody in Him. And if you see image of, he's called Nebecha. He's got wings, he's got horns, he's got, you name it. He's the All God, the most powerful, is like several suns in one sun. And I think that there was a phenomenon that they discovered maybe 100 billion light years away that exploded, that had more power just for a short period than maybe 100 suns of our solar system. So the one God, the Almighty, the All God, He was like that. Right? Nebecha, the Lord to the limit, the all god. That is to say, by Temu, the all god or the sun god of Heliopolis, after he came into being, and he says, I was the creator in Capri. I created the creator of creations, the creator of all creation. Subsequently, I created multitudes of creation which came forth from my mouth. The sun god was also called Capri in the morning at sunrise, and then, there was always a Capri at sunrise, Ra at midday, high noon, and Temu at evening. So you have the New Year's Eve, the old guy dies, and the new baby is born on January 1st, and then somewhere in midsummer, he's like Ra, and at the end of December, he's like the old guy on the stick. You remember the riddle of the Sphinx? What starts on 4, then on 2, and then on 3. It was the baby, the man walking on 2 feet, the baby on 4, 2 arms, 2 legs, creeping around, the man walking on 2, and the old man 2 feet on a stick. The sun god was called Capri in the morning at sunrise, Ra at midday, and Temu at sunset. Out of blackness came creation. And that concept, I was pondering this thing for a good many days. When I think about Dr. Ben, he often says to black men, you got to worship this black woman because she can do what you cannot do. And then he put the black woman on a pedestal like that. She stands on the obelisk. The Washington Monument is a kind of obelisk in that it stands on a pedestal with a small pyramid at the top, but it is not same as the Egyptian pyramid, because the Egyptian pyramid obelisk was a single piece of stone quarried from the quarry, transported to the place of erection. There they were inscribed, and then they was erected. The Washington Monument is a concrete structure with stone and steel, so it's different. Be aware of that. So the god in the liquid mass of plasma was called Noon. Noon, he was bisexual or hermaphiliac. That is to say, he was able to impregnate himself. And the name of the female counterpart was Nunette. So you have Noon and Nunette. One part of him is represented by a frog and the other by a snake. So Nabacha continues to say that heaven or the sky had not been created when I was there. Dr. Obenga, he is Dr. Diab's assistant. Dr. Diab passed, and Obenga is still alive. I understand he's in Congo building a university, whatever. But he talked about how divinity stepped out of a parallel universe into this universe and found uncreated matter, which he said was water, liquid. And then he began creation. And then much of this comes out of within the theological mind, young theological emerging mind of the Egyptian, when they observe the inundation of the Nile, where the land is covered, and ultimately when the water begins to recede, they begin to see the emergence or re-emergence of land, and they took it from there and constructed their own theories, very much unlike Hollywood, as they would write their scripts. He said, heaven or the sky had not been created, the earth had not been created, the children of the earth and reptiles had not been fashioned in that place. I raised them up from Nunu, from a state of helpless inertness. I found no place wherein I could stand. I formed a spell in my heart. I laid a foundation by Ma'at, physical law, moral law, philosophical law. I made forms of every kind. I was one by myself, for I had not then evacuated under the form of Shu, and I had not then passed water under the form of Tefta. There existed no other who worked with me. I laid a foundation in my own heart, on my mind. Many creations of creations came into being from the creation of the offspring, from the creators of their children. I thrust my phallus into my hand, my closed hand. I made my seed to enter my mouth. I poured it into my mouth. I made my seed to enter my hand. I poured it into my mouth. I evacuated under the form of Shu. I passed water under the form of Tefta. That is to say, he masturbated, he swallowed it, and he spit out these gods that he created. Shu and Tefta. That's the first couple to be on the face of the earth. And then Shu and Tefta created Geb and Nut, earth and sky goddess. And that couple created Osiris, Isis, Set, and Nephthys. So those four pairs and the god Nebuchadnezzar created the first 9, or the first Enad, or the first Agdod. So an Agdod is 9, and Enad can be 8. In some cases, like in Karnak, the Enad is 50 members of the divine troop. Something happened to the god and he lost his eye. I postulate it could have been an eclipse that blocked his eye, so this is how it's projected. Falling on these things, I united and gathered together my generative members, and I shed tears over them. And men and women straightforward came into being, the teardrops which came from my eyes. So people were born as a result of the tears that the god shed. The text mentioned a second eye, which is the moon, which the god seems to have produced from his first eye. That is to say, the sun. So the sun and moon came. So oftentimes you see an image of the eye of Horus. You generally see the right side. The right side symbolizes the sun. You don't hardly see both eyes together, but when you do see the two eyes of Horus together, the left eye symbolizes the moon. So moon is on the left, the sun is on the right. On the far side, the sun, he bestowed the urice of fire. That's the energy emitted from the sun. Remember now, George G.M. James told us about the creation of the 7 planets. That is an explosion from atom that created 8 planets of our solar system that today still baffles scientists as to how did this come about. And it's passed off as Greek philosophy, but he said it's stolen philosophy. The moisture and heat which were produced by Tefnut and Shu, respectively, in the water of Rem, the great eye of the god, caused herbs, plants, trees, and creeping things to come into being, and under the influence of the moon they flourished and multiplied exceedingly. The moon took up its place in the face of the god and ruled the whole earth. Shu and Tefnut, female counterpart, Tefnut produced Geb, the earth god, and Nut, the sky goddess, and Geb and Nut produced Osiris, Isis, Set, and Nephthys. So with the appearance of Shu and Nephthys, the twin lion gods, as they are called, the first great act of creation was performed. The dryness of the abyss of Nu, the chaos was destroyed, and Shu and Tefnut filled the space above Nu. The earth took the place of Nu and divided the space, or sky, which is above it from that which was below it. Shu was light, heat, and air, and Tefnut was mist, cloud, and rain. So, in this early period of theological and religious construction, various centers of theology with their priests jockeying for supremacy emerged. Of course, we know of 5 centers of religious theology. Heliopolis, with the first 9 gods. So you have Ra, Atum, the principal god, and he created Shu and Tefnut, and they created Geb and Nut, and Geb and Nut created the 4 gods, Osiris, Isis, Set, and Nephthys. So they formed the first Abdul. The second center of theology was Memphis. Memphis, the principal god of Memphis was Ptah. Ptah was a slick dude, if you will. So he said, listen, your God system needs some essence. So I don't want to destroy it, I want to incorporate it into my greater concept. So out of his theological system emerged the Memphite theology. Okay, so in around 3200 or so, we got the question of when in fact Egyptian the calendar was actually invented, right? So we have the short calendar and the long calendar, or the chronology, right? So anyway, around 3200, and today they've squeezed it to bring it down to something like 2900, because some have argued that they want it to be contemporary with Mesopotamia. And so they could say that there's a lineal extension of these thoughts, that these white people over there had the same thoughts that the blacks had over here, so they brought their ideas here. Anyway, in 3200 thereabouts, Narmer conquered the north and united the country, and he drained the area, a swampy area in the vicinity of today's Cairo, and he built this white wall. He built a wall to contain the new land that was drained from the Nile, and he established Ptah as he established a temple. He built a temple for Ptah, and he established the legitimacy of Ptah's theology in Memphis. So in that area in the north, there were 2. I don't want to use the word competing, but 2 espousing theologies. So what Ptah did was said, listen, I'm not here to destroy you guys, I just want to raise you to a higher level. And he took the 8 gods that were created by Ra, and he incorporated them into the Memphite theology. Right? What do we know about the Memphite theology? When we said Memphite theology, we said the theology practiced at Memphis under the worship of the one god Ptah. Well, if we fast forward to the 25th dynasty, when the Ethiopians conquered Egypt around 760 or so BC, when Egypt was in the decline. Now, a couple of things here, because I got a new book. Well, I'm working on it. It's called Ethiopians in Egypt, right? But Pianke, the son of Kasha, he was concerned that there was chaos on his northern border. That is to say, okay, so he invaded Egypt, founded the 25th dynasty, and he left the only record, okay, in the coronation. And creation is coronation, is the creation of the new king. And in the coronation, there are a number of things that have to take place. First of all, the old king has kingship is succession. There must be a father and a son. So the father, the son succeeds his father. So the old king has to die, so the new king becomes king, and he now has a son who will succeed him. So what happens with this whole process is, before the actual creation is the succession. That is to say, I'm going to succeed my father. Then now I have to be coronated. And then after I'm coronated, I have to be enthroned. And before I'm enthroned, I have to go to Heliopolis. Heliopolis is the place where Ra did the first creation. That's the theology that Ptah captured, right? So on his way to get to, after the succession, the enthronement, the creation, the enthronement, now you have to go to Heliopolis to be transformed spiritually, theologically, psychically, from a human being into a god. And Pianke is the only one who left evidence of the journey and the actual transformation from being a mere king to being a divine king. And the second thing that the Ethiopians were famous for is the Memphite theology, right? It's called the Shabaka stone. Okay, so Pianke was succeeded by Kasha, Kasha the father, Pianke, Shabaka, and then Taharka. So Shabaka, when he became king, and after he had gone to Heliopolis to be transformed like his father was, he found this stone. Well, not a stone, he found this theological doctrine written on papyrus, but it was being eaten by moths. It was disintegrating. So he had it transcribed onto a black basalt stone, and then sometime during that is to say, the theology of Ptah, how he created the world, is inscribed in this Shabaka stone that ended up in the British Museum up to today. But before I got there, before they discovered it in the 19th century, the Arabs had it and they were using it as a millstone, M-I-L-L stone. And in the middle is a big hole where they pump it and they use it. I don't know if it was to pull the animals or whatever, or have the animals pull it. So part of the story is lost. So now, in 1905, the American Egyptologist James Henry Breaston, they discovered, you see, what happens is that these guys that were working, Dr. Ben said, get the oldest material you can find, which is where I come in, because I studied the areas of significance in archaeological excavation. Jeremiah C. calls it reclamation. Right? So what they were doing is that they introduced a new concept called archaeology, how to systematically excavate the land and clear the land, which they've done a wonderful job, but they saw a lot of stuff. And they buried it in their museums that we didn't know. So in 1905, James Breaston, they found this Shabaka stone that he entitled The Philosophy of a Memphite Priest. And he translated the thing, and I had some problems with that. First of all, he's saying, the guy who wrote the stone didn't know what he was doing. I mean, he just copied stuff. Well, that's questionable. In the 19th century, an Ethiopian working for the Egyptian government discovered a stone in the Ethiopian capital. All right? And he translated this document and he turned it over to the authorities. And when he turned this thing over, everybody was dumbfounded. My God! It's the philosophy of Ptah, how Ptah created the world. So Breaston said, this guy didn't even know what he was doing. He didn't understand. But the thing is that he did it so accurate that the great scholars of Europe were dumbfounded. They weren't dumbfounded because it was incorrectly translated. They were dumbfounded because of the significance of this God telling you what he did to bring the world into creation. Right? So again, the arrogance of the white man, let's face it, it's the same way. Okay, look, during this rush to excavate Egypt, this fellow named Lepsius, the German, he sent to Berlin 15,000 pieces of artifacts, right? This woman named Lorna Oakes said that, oh, well, you know, let's just send 15,000 squeezes. What is a squeeze? A squeeze is that I look at this image here, and I get a tracing paper, and I do like that, and I make a copy. This is not what he did. But she's the same woman who said, we write for a European audience. So she ain't writing, she ain't doing what we're doing, or I'm doing, Dr. Lewis is doing. They're writing for their own people. So that when we write for our people, they got an attitude. I mean, here we are, right? Right now, we're living in a time where everybody's lambasting the new mayor-elect that he's a socialist. Nobody's saying anything about the conservative. I mean, he's a conservative. That's good. But socialist is bad. So it's a question of how the information is presented, and what is your analysis about the presented information. How do you parse right from falsity and make your own decisions based on your own cognition? Okay. So in this early period of theological and religious construction, various centers of theology with their priests jockeying for supremacy emerged. Of course, we know of Heliopolis, Memphis, Hermopolis. So at Heliopolis, the principal god is Ra, Atum. Well, Ra in the morning, Kepri in the morning, Ra at midday, and Atum in the evening. It's the same guy across, transiting the heavens on a daily basis. Memphis, Ptah, Hermopolis, thought, the god of wisdom, writing, construction. Karnak, Amun-Ra, the smartest one of all of them. He says, I'm incomprehensible. I cannot be, you can't even imagine who I am. And he wore 2 feathers. So when the breeze blew and the feathers rattled, you know he was nearby. But, so, you know, his theologians were able to coach him in the most unquestionable manner. Then we have Khnum, who was, his temple was at Elephantine Island in the south of Egypt, at the border in the city of Aswan. And it's interesting because those Nubians up there, and you know, when we, in Dr. Ben's time, when we would go to Egypt, the blacks in Egypt would call us Nubian Americans. They don't do that no more. You know why? Because a lot of our people went over there with their black. The arrogance of the American abroad is terrible. But the arrogance of the black American abroad is even more terrible. So now, you know, they try, I mean, Kevin Hart, when he was blocked from going into Egypt, is a manifestation of how these people view arrogant black Americans coming to their country. You're going there for the knowledge, you gotta be wise. And don't always trust your guide, even though you come from America and tell I'm taking you to Egypt. You don't know why he's taking you. I'm not gonna get into that, right? You gotta figure that out for yourself. But the point is that if you go there, play cool, get whatever knowledge you're gonna get, and then, you know, go from there.
Put your Uncle Tom hat on, you say?
I didn't get.
He said, put on your Uncle Tom. Put your Uncle Tom hat on while you're over there. Be your Uncle Tom.
They won't let you in?
Well, put it this way, okay? I'm going to really mention Miss Wright's book on Booker T. Dr. Clark said, when he reviewed the Atlanta speech, he said, Booker T did a little torment, right? But he constructed Tuskegee Institute that for more than 100 years have taught black men how to stand up, okay? So, listen, you gotta work your magic within the confines of where you are, okay? But what is the outcome? That is the one fundamental thing, because this guy comes to my table, I went to Egypt with this guy, I would never go back. So, you know, listen, we all got a destiny and a destination. If you get to your destination, that's what's important. How you get there, it's up to you. But keep in mind, I saw the other day that they arrested a guy for the murder of a young lady that was living across the street from 41 years later. So they'll come back to you. So you better get, in the war we used to say, I hate to say, keep your shit tight, you know. You lock your posterior so that even air can't get in there. That's how you're going to be able to work your magic to do constructive things in the interest of your people, your family, and so forth. Right? So like, you know, you can't be doing nonsense, stupid things out there and hope that you can just retire ultimately. It ain't going to happen. There's always going to be somebody trying to get you. Right? Anyway, that's another lecture. So, Thoth was the god who existed at Ashmunin. His city in ancient times is called Khnum. Right? I was there. It's far away. I was there. When I go, I don't carry people to Egypt. I used to do that in the 90s. I hire my taxi, so I had to spend the night in the location that is distant. But I went to Khnum, and all you see was 2 baboons, stone baboons, big things, that was deposited there during the time of Amenhotep III, the magnificent pharaoh who built Tuxet Temple. So Khnum Thoth was the god there, right? He was the mind and intelligence of reasoning power, the mind, intelligence, and reasoning power of the self-created. So the god that was doing the thing, inside the machine, it was Thoth. He was fixing everything for the all god to operate. So Thoth was the mind and intelligence and reasoning power of the self-created, self-subsistent God. He was the spirit and soul of the primeval ocean. He was light and life and gave life to man. 4 gods and 4 goddesses assisted Thoth in ruling Khnum. So this guy is so bad. He was a pre-existent God. That is to say, before the big God came, this guy was there. You know, so he helped to fashion the big God who says, well, there was nobody there. He didn't see Thoth. These were Nun and Nunet, Hu and Hukhet, Kok and Kukhet, and Amun and Amunet. These gods created the mount at Hermopolis on which the sun god rose. Right? So the sun god existed at Heliopolis, at Memphis, at Hermopolis, and also at Karnak. I can't tell you he was at Elephantine, because Khnum, the god who made man on his potter's wheel, he was a kind of blue-collar god. Ptah is considered the blue-collar god because he made things. He made the artisans, he made all the stuff. So there were 2 really, what we would call today blue-collar gods, right? These gods created the mound at Hermopolis on which the sun god stood. That is to say, after the waters receded from the inundation and the land began to emerge, the god now wanted to sit down. So Thoth created that piece of land upon which, and then that all God chose among the people who were born out of the sun god's eyes when he cried. He says, that's why one of the scholars say that the first architects were priests. So the God now instructed his adherents on what kind of structure to build so that he can be secure on earth and receive the ritual and the security so that he can move from the heavens to reside in the temple, his earthly home. These gods created the sun and assisted Thoth to take his stand on the mount at Heliopolis. The 8 gods were all the gods in Egypt. They were the fathers and the mothers of the sun. So the sun god, he had parents. That is, he is saying that I made my son. Okay. Okay, so now, let's get into this thing. So, in the foreword to the book, The Cultural Unity of Black Africa, Dr. Chika Anta Diop begins by assessing current approaches to recording ancient, even modern history, particularly through the warped, false lens of distortion and omission, stating, intellectuals sought to study the past, not for the pleasure they find in doing so, but to derive lessons from it. For, if necessary, to distort those lessons in the full knowledge of the facts, that they know the facts, but they misrepresent it. Right? Fact. Well, I showed you the guy, right? The image, Shinda. Only a real knowledge of the past can keep in one's consciousness a feeling of historical continuity essential to the consolidation of a multinational state. You remember now, Kwame Nkrumah was saying that the independence of Ghana was meaningless unless it was within the continental structure of Africa. It's now one state. All of Africa needs to be united. I guess the Africans in West Africa are doing something to that effect, but still they're getting a lot of pushback. In a sense, Diop was alluding to continued cultural unity, not only in ancient origination and practice, but more specifically articulating and focusing that continuity in today's world. So, creation in ancient Egypt was an important component of the Egyptian cultural experiment, similarly practiced in many other societies or places across the African continent. Then, even now, much of which Theophilo Benga. So, two of the greatest African black world-class scholars on Egypt were Diop and Obenga. In his book, Pharaonic Period, in these processes and practice of creation, we find systems that combine religion and kingship. So kingship in Egypt was essentially creation, because it was a creation of a new system. So you have creation, kingship, and theology or religion combined. That's why Dr. Carruthers, Jacob Carruthers out of Chicago says that Egypt was the only perfect government on earth. Everything else reeks of corruption. Don't let's get into our modern time frame, okay? In this process of practice of creation, we find kingship, we find systems that combine religion and kingship in creative emergence of cosmic consciousness. underscoring and admonishing political governance in service to society. For, after all, creation was attempted and accomplished in service to humanity so as to create a higher level of cosmic consciousness, wisdom, and divine knowledge. That is to say, the gods created the world for the benefit of humans and instructed their leaders to rule, be partners in experimenting the philosophic exile of Mars. Excuse me. This is why, because of such divine admonitions, insistence, and participation, Dr. Carruthers out of Chicago, and he challenged the University of Chicago because that's the school that Breasted founded, and you know they waived it, right? Breasted, I think it was James Spady who said that Breasted, first of all, in 1912, he did a lot of work. You got to give him credit. But in 1912, he described the Egyptians as tall, thin, brown men. Then when John D. Rockefeller gave him money to build Chicago House, that is to create a country within the country, to study Egypt, then he started talking about the great white race. And with that, a lot of the distortion crept into the representation. And that is why Dr. Ben Johanan admonished us to search for the earliest information you will find, work from there, publish or perish. And I'm trying to publish so as not to perish, and everything else that I showed you, especially the Temple of Luxor, right? Okay. That is why, because of these of such divine admonitions insistent upon, that Carruthers postulated that the Egyptian form of rule is the only perfect governance on earth. And he also indicated that we should not see these 5 different centers with their gods as competing entities, but as one entity, one God, one all-God, functioning in different perspectives, seen through different lenses. So, while on the one hand, Dr. Diop in Civilization okay, so his 2 most powerful books were The African Origins of Civilization, Myth or Reality, and then Civilization or Barbarism, where he broke everything down. That was his major works. He pointed to 2 particular centers of Egyptian creation concepts and worship, this being Heliopolis and Memphis, promoting the Heliopolitan and the Memphite doctrines. On the other hand, the symbolist Shwala de Labis in Sacred Science, the king of pharaonic theocracy, gives 4 such centers and philosophies under the heading: the mysteries of Heliopolis, Memphis, Hermopolis, and Thebes. Thus, he argued, revealed at Heliopolis is the creative act and the appearance of Tum, or Atum, who is a form of Ra, as well as the Ogdo, that was the 8 and the 9 and became 9, which is the analysis of that creative act. Taught at Memphis is the work of Ptah, which is the giving of form and animation to these forms. At Thebes, the fruit of the Genesis is defined through Amun and his wife Mut and their son Kansu. At Hermopolis, the milieu of generation is found described to taught connecting the 3 mysteries. So, Heliopolis, Memphis, and Karnak becomes a part of the world like thought created. And then, of course, there's Kanu at Memphis, the guy who makes man on his potter's wheel. It's interesting, a potter makes man with Nile mud. Nile mud is either brown or black. Once the water of the Nile inundation has receded, the top coat is nothing but covered with detritus, which gives it a black color. Blackness was what happened before creation. There was nothing but darkness, and then the God created light, and therefore whatever Kanu did, he made man using black mud and brown clay. There was no white people there when he was making man. To this list of cosmic creators, we may add Kanu and Elephantine Island, who control the flow of water for the inundation, which is a life-sustaining phenomenon. And equally, in addition, he maintained a temple at Esna, being the god who, utilizing Nile mud, made man on his potter's wheel. There is an image in a secluded area at Philae, Isis temple at Philae, in which we see Kanu making man on his potter's wheel, handing the child over to Isis, who presents him to Amun-Ra. There are two stories which is called Theogamy, in which the god leaves the high heavens and comes to earth to have intercourse with the king's wife to create the new king. First of all, Hatshepsut leaves a new kingdom evidence of the god appearing to her mother in a flash of light and perfume, and he had his way with her, and he told her, that child that's in your stomach, her name will be Hatshepsut, and she will rule the land. Later in the dynasty, she was the early king of the 18th dynasty. Late in the dynasty, Amenhotep III concocted the same story, where Amun left the heavens and came and found his Thutmose I, his wife, Thutmose IV, his wife alone, and he had fun with her, and he told her that guy named, the child in your stomach was named Amenhotep III, and he will be the ruler. In both cases, Kanu is seen making, after the conception, he is seen making the child and the child's image, or the double, on his wheel, and handing it to the god, on both cases. So Kanu is a busy dude, making man using Nile mud. Nile mud is brown. So Dr. Ashby, Walter Ashby, in 1997-201, he said that the Anunian theology, Anunian means the theology that came out of Heliopolis, is based on understanding that there is one supreme divinity from which all other divinities known as Pauti, and indeed nature itself, arises. That rising, according to Heliopolis tradition, came essentially from a pre-creation time. Pre-creation. That is to say, there was stuff going on. Chaos reigned, and there was need for order. So creation came into being, with Ma'at as a principle in the workers who did, let's say, molded the world or what have you. That rising, according to Heliopolis, came essentially from a pre-creation, according to Vincent Tobin, who said that the sky had not yet come into being, the earth had not yet come into being, the gods had not yet come into being, the death had not yet come into being. Okay? Dr. Obenga, on the other hand, essentially explain that divine creative forces, I've said this before, they step out from a parallel universe and finding water. There's nothing in the desert but sand, but in the river, water generates living species. He found step out from a parallel universe and finding water as uncreated matter began the creative process. Thus, this was a time when nothing existed, creating a need for cosmic generation. In inundation and resulting phenomena as water receded, the appearance of the earth as a sacred mound emerges in the Kepler beetle. The Kepler beetle is a multitude of these beetles seem to come out of the earth, come to life as the water recedes. And the sun god, when he's born in the morning, you say, well, you get up at 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock, whatever, the sun is up. No, the sun's been up since about 4. And you see that red ball in the sky, well, in our modern understanding, it's different. But according to these people, the red ball is the afterbirth of the sun. And as he begins to come across, to begin his journey across it, he has, the ritual begins. So he has his birth attendants, Horus and Thor. They wake the god, they give him a bath, they dress him, powder him, this and that, feed him, slap him in the bottom and say, go out, sail across the heavens. So when he got to the end of the sky, so in the morning, where he's Kepler, he's a beetle, or the beetle Kepler pushes the sun across the horizon. And at midday, he becomes Ra, high noon. And at the end, and he keep pushing him, of course, the boat of Ra, they have outriders, right? Ant and the two things that, you know what outrider is, right? I asked a provocative question because the whole idea of the daily ritual in heaven, where the gods wake the principal god, give him his bath, feed him, and put on his jewelry, perfume and what have you, and tell him to sail across, that is theoretical. What they do in the temple down here is practical. They do the same thing, or they do this and postulate that this is what happens up there. But when the God is sailing across the heavens, I'm asking myself, is he stopping for lunch? Because he gets down here, he gets 3 meals. He gets our breakfast, lunch, and at even time he gets a light snack. So does he stop, or is it metaphysically, spiritual, theologically, that the midday meal is transposed to the heavens, so that the God that you have to stop what he's doing, he's fed up there, because in his transition across the heavens in the solar boat, he stands between Mart, the goddess of justice, truth, and righteousness, and Thoth, the goddess of wisdom, knowledge, and writing, record keeping, or what have you. So that question, no one can answer it. So I take it that my idea was more correct. The composition of the primal waters, particularly in its primitive state, in the pre-creation state, is explained by Tobin, who writes, those primal waters of Egyptian thought were both a negative and positive entity. Negative in that they were boundless, shapeless, infinite, and chaotic, all ominous concepts to the Egyptian mentality, but positive in that they contained within themselves a certain potential for being. The creative potential of the primeval waters is evident in their personification as a self-generated god, Nut, who as expressed in chapter 17 of the book of Going Forth of the Dead, stated, I am the great God who came into existence by myself, known who created his own name as a God in the primeval time of the gods. Thus, for the myopic mentality of Heliopolis, in the beginning there was chaos, but that chaos already contained within itself the potential for order. And this is where Mart, she is a pre-creation goddess, just as how her companion is thought to have existed before creation. As such, we can easily argue Mart was primordial, and when theologians as Tahotep Merikari affirm Mart was from the beginning. This is what they meant. Nevertheless, except for Ra and Atum, essential having male and female attributes, goddesses played a significant role in creation as well as supporting the male and female divinities. Dr. Leonard Jeffries often spoke of the complementarity of the African male-female principle, and as such, much of this could not be accomplished absent the quintessential exilor of Mara. The queen of righteousness was there from the beginning of the creative process. Hence, once she had broken the ceiling of significant female input as goddesses Nati, Hat, Isis, Selke, Beseshet, Sekhmet, Neat, and others, these essential figures began making their way in their essential function. So nothing happened without women. Hathor is particularly significant for in being Ra's wife, as Ashby explained. She represents the source of spiritual energy that drives the universe. Again, if there's no female input, the universe is a standstill. And we know today that the universe is a boundless living organism that constantly expands. I mean, they're talking about billions of light years away. I mean, this being so, we can say Mara provides balance and order, the equilibrium of nature within the creative process. In addition to Mart, Ashby said, creation is a cycle. That is, the creation occurs cyclically. God brings creation into existence, then dissolves it again. We must remember the Egyptians always viewed the daily rising of the sun as continuous creation. And in this phenomenal process, the goddesses were considered significant personages. Remember now, such a thing as the coronation. Coronation, again, the Egyptian never saw life on a linear plane. Mm-hmm. They saw it in a cyclical plane, and they used the voyage of the sun across the heavens, and they postulated a subterranean heaven. And that subterranean heaven is ruled by Osiris as the god of the dead. So that when the sun got up there in the western hemisphere, he had to travel underground to arrive one morning on the eastern horizon. He encountered a number of enemies. He encountered the dead. He passed through the land of the dead. He had an agreement with Osiris. Listen, I'll give you a little sunlight down here and this and that, and you make sure that I get to your kingdom so that I can arrive on the eastern horizon in the morning and begin my work. And then we are in, not in competition, but we're in cooperation. So in that darkened environment, for 1 hour, each section of the night lamp, the underworld, got a ray of sunshine, and then he moved on. And there are some helpers of the god Ra in the afterlife who help him to navigate some of the obstacles so that he could, finally sail through the darkness and arrive, and then This is a continuous process. So too is creation or coronation is a creation of a new beginning of rulership, which is a system of kingship that the gods implemented in Egypt, so that it could continue in service to society and the gods. So the gods can come and live in their temples, and the people on the earth can benefit from the bounty that the sun and its helpers brings to humanity, and humanity in return will perpetuate the ritual, which is praising the gods, providing sustenance, providing security, and on and on and on and on. So now, should I take some questions and continue? Because I still got a lot of things. Are there any questions I should ask for so far clarification? Because I still got a lot more I need to.
Does anybody on the Zoom have any questions so far?
Okay. So, in her own right, Mart appears a quintessential divinity. For besides possessing emblematic principles, the impact she exerted on others, whether they gods, kings, humans, was profound. This is explained by one Emily Tita, who states that the deity Mart pervaded the world of the gods. She was the eye of Ra. So parts of her body was equated with Ra's body. She is also the food of the gods, and the gods claim to have gone on. So she's been everything, everywhere. Like, you know, the quintessential woman, the good wife. Mart served as archetypal food offering for the gods, as suggested by offering seeds in the tomb of Merenptah, Seti II, Torset, Setnag, Ramses III, as well as the small temple of Medin Abu, where vessels normally associated with wine or other liquid offerings are shown presented to the god. Yet the offering seems labeled as presenting to Mart, even though they're presenting to, you know, it's like, I don't want to say she's a gatekeeper, but instead of bringing the food to the main man, they bring it to her. She's that important. The philosophers such as Ptahhotep reminded in his instruction. He said, there is punishment for him who passes over Mart's laws. What is the laws? The laws is righteousness, truth, justice, order, balance, equanimity.
The law of Maya.
Yeah. He says, do Mart so that you can endure on earth. Kajemi says, do Mart, for Mart is what the king loves. And even in the netherworld, when we spoke of Dr. Malala Karenga at the 1992 conference, when he said how you tremble when you stand in judgment before the great God. The man said, the deceased said, I have not disputed the king. That is a profound statement, that to say, I live righteously. These examples underscore the significance of Mart as a moral principle, an unalterable law, and a guiding light. Nevertheless, it's difficult to comprehend in man's march towards civility from an early as a prehistoric period. Family units predominate. First, in the family settings, there are social and religious realms of Nile Valley cultural experience. Given all such evolving experiences were based on the family structure of husband, wife, and child, generally son, the divine example was similarly patterned. Thus, even as the Egyptian conceived of his Godhead in similar arrangement pattern after the family unit of father, wife, and son to form the first trilogy, we find Jean-Jacques Champollion would later label this divine arrangement the triad. Such cosmic groupings could be extended to larger units as the Agdod and the innate. Again, the outbound is basically 8 on 1 9, and that first appears at Heliopolis. And then again we see the innate 8 and Ptah 9 at Memphis. But at Karnak Temple in Thebes, the innate of Amun-Ra's circle comprised 15 members. So the trilogy of three, father, son, father, wife, and son, 3. 3 times 3 is 9. 3 times 3 times 3 is 27. So there were groupings of 3 gods, 9 gods, 27 gods in the conception of the mind of this African. You see, the problem with the European scholars is that they do not give the African credit conceiving of deep thought. Deep thought, that is to say, being able, or back in the day, someone, they said that the African could only run the 100-yard dash. He couldn't run the marathon. And we got, 2 weeks ago, we had the Kenyans beating the entire field, both male and female. 1, 2, 3 were the male runners. 1, 2, 3 were the female runners. Again, we had this here with Joe Namath. Joe Namath, back in the late 70s, this guy named Morgan Worthy published this article in Science, and he was saying that, he was praising blue-eyed people, okay? And he said that even in football and baseball, the 2 greatest scholars, the 2 greatest players, Pete Rose, blue-eyed, Joe Namath, blue-eyed. Joe Namath, there are 2 types of tasks in football, self-paced and reactive. Self-paced is the quarterback. The quarterback throws the ball and the runners, receivers, catch the ball. So Joe Namath's task is self-paced. The runners is reactive. And then we had Doug Williams, the Washington Redskins, came out. I can never forget that image. This guy came out to the field when Doug Williams beat him. You guys must remember this. Some of you are too young anyway. John Elway came out all teeth. Who was it? His team against the Jets. No, against Washington. And Doug Williams, he beat him about 42 to 9 or something like that. So we had the first black quarterback winning the Super Bowl. And then, well, after that is history. But they don't give the black scholars the proper respect and a recognition that they are capable. I mean, I can't blow my own horn. I don't have any wind left, but I remember the guy, this guy wrote a book. Damn it, I wrote 72 books. You see that? But I'm just a regular guy. So the work is getting done. Now, Ben said publish or perish, and I'm trying to publish. So we see that the Raven permeating religion and influence governance patterns functioning as necessary and essential cultural components throughout dynastic rule. So, seeking creative leadership and emergent rulership patterns, we look to the formative prehistoric period, where practically every subgrouping, every village, polis, nome had its own god, a local deity worshipped by local adherents under a leadership structure. With unification came conscious application in religious consolidation, which meant strong local deities were absorbed into the emerged principal deity, while the weaker local deities were phased out. In this divine configuration that evolved through creative philosophic audacity and intellectual cosmic consciousness, the sun god as a radiant power emerged, essentially establishing and admonishing Martian thought and practice, manifesting as righteousness, truth, and justice. In fact, reflecting this idea, the sun god Ra is considered the maker of righteousness, even though his daughter Ma'at did most of the work but got little credit. You know the story. The woman does all the work, the guy gets the credit. Nevertheless, it is said, the sun god lives on righteousness. He feeds on righteousness, embodied in truth and justice as ethical standards and that molded society, much of which is associated with his daughter Ma'at, who, as Ashby writes, Ma'at, Hathor, and Jehuti were not part of the Ennead in Heliopolis. That is, the netters of the Ennead are Ra-Atu, Shu, Tefnut, Geb, Nut, Osiris, Isis, Set, and Nephthys. As stated, Hathor, Jehuti, and Ma'at represent attributes of the Supreme Being as the very self, very stuff, or substratum, which makes up creation. This means that they are the elements which the creative principle uses in the act of creation. So the guy that's making creation, he throws a little woman in there and he molds the door. You know, the door is, you understand, you see the baker with the flour on the table, and there's a guy, so he throws in a little woman in there, and then the fruit turns out wonderful. Absence the woman in the dough, the thing is hard, it tastes less than whatever. I know you understand what I mean. Okay, so this means that there are elements which the creative principle uses in the act of creation. This idea may be better understood through the following simile. Consider a lump of clay, the clay being given several forms, but the substratum of any form which the clay is given, be it a pot, a plate, a bowl, a cup, etc., will always remain the same, clay. So you're making a canoe makes man out of clay, which is a brown substance. There is no way that substance, after it's made, can turn white. Think about it. The composition of clay does not change. In the same matter, Hathor, Ma'at, and the Huti represent attributes of the Supreme Being which do not change regardless of the forms which objects in creation takes. Therefore, they are the constant, absolute principle among all that is changing, chaotic, transient, and therefore illusory in human experience as well as in creation. Hathor represents the force of spiritual energy which drives the entire universe. Again, if there's no woman in there, the universe will probably collapse. Right? The relentless order and synchronicity of the planets and the stars, as well as the order of events which occur in the life of every human being, is symbolized by Ma'at. And the light of consciousness, which is underlying characteristic of all sentient life, is symbolized by the Tehuti, thought. Two other divinities, Wachin and Nekhabet, represent the dual aspect of creation. The two lands, Upper Egypt and Lower Egypt, symbolized by the lotus plant and the papyrus plant. In the mystical sense, they symbolize heaven and earth, spirit and matter. However, they also represent the subtle spiritual energy known as the serpent power, more commonly known as the name Kundalini. The serpent power is the life force energy which sustains life and promotes the desire for action of the human being. It operates through the subtle spiritual energy centers and is symbolized by the shaft, which is intertwined by serpents in the staff of Wachet and Nekhbet, as well as the staff of Jehuti. The unity of these two principles, which are opposite poles of the same energy, is synonymous with enlightenment and the absolute truth. A principle among divinities, Hathor represents the life force of the life force energy of Ra. She is the power of creation itself. The manifestation of the divine spirit is seen as female and the soul of creation as male. The Hutu represent the mind of God. He represents the higher intellectual capacity of the mind when it is attuned to the divine. The Hutu is a messenger of God. Mat, Ma, Mate represent the very order which constitutes creation. Therefore, it is said that Ra created the universe by putting Ma in place of chaos. Ma in place of chaos. So, she is referred to as Marti, the double goddess. An additional manifestation of Ma'at is found in the forms of Aset and Negbet. Therefore, creation itself is Ma'at. She is the mother of the universe. In ancient Indian, Ma'at or Ma'at signifies mother. In further explanation regarding immutability of divine creativity, Ashby condensed, creation without order is chaos. Consider what would happen if the elements, water, air, fire, and earth, did not exist according to their set parameters. That is to say, you got to do what you are supposed to do. Again, let's take, for example, this is not political, but the Congress is supposed to represent the people, not any individual. All right? You know the story. I'm not getting there. Remember Booker T. Washington, right? What would happen if water became flammable, or if earth became gaseous? What would happen if the laws of gravity acted in reverse? Instead of holding you down, lift you up, there would be nothing. There would be no consistency or order in the phenomenal universe, and nowhere for life to exist. So Ma'at is the basis upon which creation exists, and creation is the mode in which the divine supreme being expresses him or herself. Therefore, anything which impedes order, regularity, and harmony is against man, creation, and God. Spiritual movement and spiritual practice are difficult in any atmosphere of unrest, agitation, disorder, and turmoil. Likewise, anything which promotes order, peace, harmony, truth, justice, righteousness, automatically promotes spirituality, divine awareness, spiritual wisdom, and self-discovery. Of course, and with names or naming being important, what we call God is also labeled Netta, puissance, principle, spirit, divine manifestation, Nebecha, supreme being, high God, supreme deity, divine self, supreme spirit, etc. So, the relative notion of intellectual audacity is supposedly only a virtue of white men, which tells how wrong were and are those people who especially give primacy to the Greeks in philosophy, theology, even creation. In fact, from the creation experience, Atum, Ra, early embraced the goddess Ma'at, who significantly influenced Ra. This was evident among other experiences, but particularly clear for when Ra daily sailed across the heavens in a solar bark. He stood between Ma'at and Thoth for protection and to ensure he manifests Ma'at's divine virtue of righteousness, truth, and justice permeating throughout the society. In 1905, Randall McIver wrote Eureka, pointing to two races of people occupying Egypt: Caucasians, whites and Europeans in the north, and black or Africans in the south. A few things immediately. We know Mut signifies mother, I said that before. But first, by the archaic period of dynasties 1 and 2, culture was uniform throughout Egypt, especially in Upper Egypt, the central part of the Egyptian pharaonic kingdom. Second, Upper Egypt beyond the tip of Upper Egypt extended from Elephantine Island at Aswan all the way past Cairo in the north. That is below Cairo and encompassing Heliopolis, home of Ra Atum worship. The north extended for much of the delta region extended towards the Mediterranean Sea. This city, the Bible called On, and the Greeks Heliopolis, which we recognize today, Africans of Egypt gave the name Anu. we must remember when Alexander Moret postulated his question, by whom was the South influenced, if not by the North, which Dr. Diop responded, if so, why are all the most important sites and monuments are located in the South? It is interesting that Moret and so many others argued the American Egyptologist James Henry Brester's first union theory of the Northern Kingdom conquering the South, so that Narmer's conquest is then considered the second unification. Many are in agreement, and this is important. Archaeology has not been able to prove the existence of a northern kingdom. Certainly not a viable kingdom that could effectuate such a conquest given the martial vigor and combativeness of the South. What Narmer, the face people, and this is interesting, representing the white crown did find was probably a rabble that he united and gave the black people. I didn't say black, back. So when the Egyptian was like today, the Muslims turned towards Mecca. So when the Egyptian was in his element, philosophical, spiritual, religious one, he turned to the South, his place of origin. Right? So the South was called the face people, and the back was called the black people, not the black people. Black people in the South. The North, where the Europeans were, they're the back, because they're behind me. I'm looking at where I came from, and they're in the back. I'm facing the face people. People facing. So he found this rabble, and he gave him a crown. But now what they're trying to say, it's like the Europeans who came to America found the Native Americans. Today, if we get rid of all the Native Americans, and a Martian comes at the end of the century to America, and all it sees white people, they're trying to get rid of the blacks. We ain't going nowhere, But I was in Haiti during the earthquake, and I had a young doctor there. He took me around. I got pictures of all the 9 hospitals that were damaged, and the presidential palace and all that, right? And when I came back, this professor, Ron Daniels. Ron Daniels came in and given a report to cemetery, Dr. Mark's group, and he talked about in the formation of the Haitian Revolution, with the women, bottom belly, and some of the revolutionaries was they had come and they fought in the Battle of Savannah. I know a gentleman who was from Savannah, and I told him about the Battle of Savannah. He said, I never heard of that. Well, you don't know everything, right? So he said that the Africans who fought for the French at the Battle of Savannah with the Americans against the British, he said, we have learned the ways of the white man. That is to say, he said that we have learned how to load the rifle at the breech, not at the muzzle. In the old days, you put the ball in there and stuff it down, and then he said, we have learned the ways of white, how to load the rifle at the breech over here. And we have learned how to shoot the cannon with accuracy. We had this guy named Bobby Toole. He said, he was an artillery. He said, I can put the shot in your back pocket, how accurate. So they are saying that they had learned, he said that we have learned the man who preaches the white man's God is not a true believer. So these things, he says, let us go forward with our own revolution because we have learned from the experiences that we have suffered. So we, as black people in America, we ain't going nowhere. And these people gotta know that. Okay? They're gonna know that, they say in the formation of this country 250 years ago, there was a mantra that said, don't tread on us. Well, the blacks are saying the same thing, don't tread on us. Because, well, we have a history to tell. And it will not be erased because of people like what's happening right here. Right? Especially this gentleman here that insisted we tell the truth about our history, our knowledge, and how many books they were born. We will write more books than they could ever born. So our people will know when the smoke clears, all this is over, we're still standing. I saw the guy singing the song, I'm still standing. We will still be standing when all of this is over. Okay? And they should know that. I have a long-standing friend who lives in the South. I was telling him, he said, man, I'm living it. Okay? Don't tread on us. So many are in agreement archaeology has not been able to prove the existence of a northern kingdom. Certainly not a viable kingdom that could effectuate such a conquest given the martial vigor and combativeness of the South. What Norman, the face people representing the white crown did for him was probably a rabble that he united and gave the black people, those black people, a red crown and some respectability to truly affirm the dual nature, spiritual, cosmic nature. He's king of upper and lower. Duality. Duality, there's two banks of the river. There's southern and Nile and black land, red land, the dual nature of his kingdom, which is based on spirituality, metaphysical, spiritual nature of his kingship, represented by the white crown. So he formed this double crown. And again, in the misrepresentation, they tell us it's a red and white crown. It's not a red and white crown. It's a white crown resting on the red crown. Again, just like the directional orientation, north-south. It's not north-south, it's south-north. But we never question. Remember Dr. Lewis say, my job is to present information, your job is to analyze what I present. However, we can easily argue, though Norma was cut off, set out from Abydos with his armada, Dr. Diop identified him as Theban from Thebes, Luxor. Nevertheless, this conqueror brought the elements and components of a stable government, an organized military, an enlightened religious belief system, and an intellectual acumen in order to establish a functional system of pharaonic kingship that lasted for some 3,000 years. Nevertheless, we need to be cognizant, even if we concede this poor man northern kingdom, it poses the dilemma of white supremacy ideology, which was very much alive and well today, yet it's being vigorously challenged. Sometimes blatant, sometimes soft-felt and obfuscated because so much is made manifest today. It cannot be vociferously argued today. Dr. Leonard James' contention that the existential data contradicts the symbolic representation. That is to say, the image I showed you in here, this image is not the real image. This is the real image. The symbolic representation, the existential data contradicts the symbolic representation. So what's in the book is symbolic. What's outside the book is existential. Advocates saying, challenging the false denial of Africans' intellectual capability and creativity to construct configurations such as the creation process. So they're saying that black men can't think the creation. Only white men can do that. There is a belief that, like the image in there. God is white. He created man in his image. So man in his image had to be white. And therefore, in the scientific realm, white man is superior to a black man who is inferior in the social order. So therefore, he has to be inferior in the scientific order. But what we are showing you here today is that when these black men and women were constructing heaven and earth and underworld, they were the white people.
There were no white people.
No. Huh? So, I mean, we were doing our thing. This is our thing, really.
How are they Johnny complaining with it?
Well,
calling the shots.
I don't know if he was expelled out to Eden. So he went up in the north where the coal is, and the coal started biting, and then, you know, he evolved into that. But again, Dr. Dion, civilization of barbarism, it talks with that. Even in this book here, I have a significant portion of my Kings and Commoners at Luxembourg, right? I have a significant element, a chapter of Dr. Diop's civilization of barbarism, where he talks, the man was so much of a genius. He sketched the whole thing, where the Europeans came, how he transformed himself into who he is today in that hostile northern environment.
Stuck up in their color turf, black folks turn white, is that what happened?
The white man is the false evolution of a black man, right?
I think so.
Some of the earliest people in Europe were Africans,
Exactly.
right? And they adapted to the environment, and then whatever they took with them in that new environment got corrupted, so that it's like okay, look. I saw a clip on TV the other day. A black woman is saying that we are in the Donald J. Trump Republican Party in Brooklyn. I mean, give me a break. This man has abused black women so much. For a black man to stand, a black woman to stand there and say, I mean, the young Republicans, okay, they censured them the other day, but they still calling us monkeys and apes. So is she a monkey? I mean, they may not be calling her to her face, but they're thinking that way, right? So, I mean, we gotta be careful what we bring home, okay?
We don't care what we think and what we accept.
Well,
what we think and what we accept.
we cannot allow them to wash it.
Isn't that their choice?
We cannot allow them to wash an Ethiopian white. You know, I mean, you ever seen that image back in the day where they got this young black guy, a babe, you know, in a tub, and they washing him to change his complexion.
Wash the pigment off.
Yeah, washing him, right?
The melanin
So
off.
it came out as washing an Ethiopian white. It's a very difficult thing. But then they're able to do that through manipulation of your mind,
Because
which
they
is based on what you are taught.
Because they control the media.
Well,
They control the government. They control that they are the
the
control.
brother that was here talk about who controls the media.
Well, if they do, they can make Cleopatra and Nefertiti and anybody else that will be white immediately.
Well, that's Hollywood. Okay,
That's white folks.
You know which movie has shown? You know which movie has been shown the most throughout the entire world? 10 Commandments. Right? They made that in Arizona, right? Not in Egypt. You know, they sent some guy over there to take a few pics of what have you. You understand? But you remember Dr. Jeffries got into a lot of trouble when they were talking about the curriculum of inclusion, right? I was saying how Hollywood has emasculated the black image, right? And it's like, I don't know if it's only in that era. in that realm, but when you think about the music industry, right, the great classics of the 60s, 50s, 60s, 70s, even the early 80s, those guys were paid pittance who made those songs, you know, the different groups and what have you. And today, they never own their masters.
Well, they've got a little money, but they told the truth with lyrics. The music we have now is filth.
Yeah, but I'm not talking about telling the truth. I'm talking about who owned
the lyrics had more sense, were sound, and they helped the community to go forward and stay alive.
Yeah,
what you get now is filth and degrading black women, calling us the B word.
That's not the point I'm making.
What's
right?
the point you're making?
The point I'm making is who owned the masters of the songs. Right? Who owned? Okay, I was looking at again, it's another DVD, CD, right, of Johnny Mathis Christmas songs. Right? You remember Johnny Mathis with that part? I don't think he owned his songs.
He didn't.
Right? But today you can buy songs on eBay or wherever they sell them. Right? So the thing is that ownership of your intellectual property, recognition and ownership.
Well, it's back to what I just said. It's who controls the media, who calls the shots. And it's them. They are the controlling, ruling people.
Well, my point was that only recently have some of these young artists been able to control the masters of their work. You know what I mean? The first copy, right? So, thank goodness, I try to, I'm not selling books. Nobody's buying my books. But that's not dissuading me. You know, I sell a few. I mean, if it was one of these rap songs I was making, calling women out of their names, I mean, I'd be laughing all the way through Wall Street. But I'm writing correct history that my grand and my great-grands will have knowledge of the historic black past. I'm not going to get rich over this, but I did make my contribution. And why it's important, I thought about it, all of our great men within the last 30 years or whatever, they were here, and they stood up, but they're gone, and they didn't leave anything. You hear what Brother Ray said earlier? Nobody's talking about Sonny Carson.
Yeah, it should be.
Your grandchildren will be able to use this as a starting point to find out about Sonny, and like everything else about my work. And that's where my pleasure comes from. Being able to complete this task. Dr. Bell said, Monderson, publish or perish. And I ain't about to perish. Okay, so in this respect, I'm underscoring the audacity of Egyptian African theological construction. Wanting further clarify, there were several high god systems in ancient Egyptian mythology. High god means the highest god or goddess within that particular system of theology is considered to be the original deity from which all others emanated as cosmic forces. Thus, Osiris is known as Parneto, or the god, the high god, and creation is composed of other cosmic forces which originated from Osiris. The cosmic forces are known as Netas, or gods and goddesses. It is important to understand that the high gods and goddesses, as well as the Egyptian trinities, originated from the same transcendental supreme being which was without name or form, but which was referred to as Neteru, Netta of Nettas, supreme being, above all gods and goddesses, and Nemecha, There were several forms of the Trinity in ancient Egyptian religion, depending on the geographic locality where the teaching was espoused. These included Amun, Mut Khans, Ta, Sekmet, Nefertum. These are trinities, right? Trilogy. Horus, Hathor, Hosomatus, Khnum, Anubis, Satis, Ta, Seko, Asar. However, the most popular trinity throughout all ancient Egypt was Osiris, Isis, and Hathor. And Osiris, Isis, and Horus. Sorry. This Nebuchadnezzar is often referred to as the all-god, possessing the combined power of all the gods. Additionally, while Horus the Younger, who was worshipped at Fu Temple, was the son of Osiris and Isis, the elder Horus, worshipped beside Sobek, the crocodile god, was a member of the Heliopolitan Ogdon, making 10 instead of 9 gods. Now, when we say Horus, there are 2 Horuses. There's the elder Horus who worshipped at Komombo Temple, double temple that has two sanctuaries, 2 priesthoods, 2 aisles, 2 of everything. He was one of the most ancient of the gods. And the younger Horus was the son of Osiris and Isis. After Seth killed his brother Osiris, and the lady was able to find her husband body, reconstituted and be impregnated with him. They birthed a child named Horus, and he's the one who fought his uncle and established himself as successor to his father in the coronation process. Remember I said that coronation of the kingship system represents father transmitting rulership to son. So Osiris transmitted the rulership to his son. And when, in the beginning, when Geb, who was Osiris's father, succeeded, his son Osiris succeeded to the throne, and he was killed by his brother Seth. When Horus grew, he took his father to the council of gods in Heliopolis. And Geb, in ruling, divided the country into 2 halves. And he gave Seth the southern half, and he gave his son, his grandson, Horus, the northern half. And then he realized that Seth, who was one of his sons, was a bad guy. He rescinded the division and he gave everything to Horus, the whole country. Hence you have one of his titles is the Horus title. Right? And he said, I'm giving you the kingdom because you succeed your father just as your father succeeded me. So kingship in Egypt represents 2 reigns. Father being succeeded by. That is why when the old kingdom, when old king dies, there is a question of succession. In the beginning, it was naturally assumed from the old kingdom, even in the start of the middle kingdom, that the son succeeds the father. Right? But during the Middle Kingdom, there were, this scholar, German scholar said, the king's greatest enemies were the family members, because the king had several wives or concubines. And he said, well, okay, this son, my son, Monday, will succeed me, and then this queen over there, or that queen saying, why is he succeeding you instead of my son? So they planned to get rid of the old guy. And in one instance, there were 2 instances. One instance in which the coup failed, and this guy ran away to a foreign country and stayed there, and when he got all he wanted to be buried in his own country, and he appealed to the king, and he said, "Come back," and give him a nice funeral. And the second one is when the king was actually assassinated in the 12th dynasty. So the son was out in battle somewhere with his forces, and he got word that his father was killed. So during that night, he silently escaped with a few trusted associates, and he returned to the palace to proclaim himself king. And I mentioned this in another one of my writings, where in today's modern parlance, the coup, the people who planned coup and subvert proper rulership, one of the first things that they did do is they seized the airport, blocked the airport so that no foreign forces can fly in, seized the radio station, start playing military music. So when the king got back, the young king, and proclaimed himself successor to his father, from that time onward, they established the co-presidency. The word fails me right now. But in that co-presidency, the king directly affirms who will succeed him, so that there will be no question that my son, this boy, not that one, this one, he will succeed me as king. And so we have that co-regency. And that was established in the New Kingdom, so in the Middle Kingdom. So from then forward onward. But that goes right back to the original battle between Osiris and his brother Set, and Horus became the successor to his father, which is the underlying theme of the Egyptian kingship. The high god is is a personal symbol of representation with a name and form. Okay, much of the false strands of thought promoted to white racial superiority ideology was negated at the 1992 symposium on Egypt and Nubia, where David O'Connell confessed to me the Egyptians were not white. Equally, when Dr. Malana Karenga showed up for the symposium, he blew away the participants, especially when he pointed out the significance of Martian way of life as the deceased sought to stand confidently before his God at the judgment or second station. In that awesome experience when Martin ethics ruled that day in the afterlife. The construct of this post-life phenomenal dynamic is equally a fruit of the forceful, philosophic, creative African mind. Again, William Arnott in the pre-dynastic origin of Egyptian hieroglyphic, evidence for the development of rudimentary forms of hieroglyphs in Upper Egypt in the 4th millennium argued, Dr. Diop was right in his argument that ancient Egyptians were not white, but the bones cannot prove they were black. Dr. Myers proved that the bones of Hemnek was a 2nd dynasty, I can tell you which, 1st or 2nd, I can't remember, 1st or 2nd dynasty individual who found the bones of Hemnek, a king, and he, after his examination, he proved that Hemnek was in fact a Negro. Well said Negro, it means in that time, 1900 or so, that was the way in which they described our people. They were Negroes, right? So he was Negro. But keep in mind that Mahepra, who was a child of the nursery, the king grew up with set of young people. We have his body, his mummy. Gaston Maspero, one of the great French Egyptologists. He wrote all of the place cards in the museum. He was hired twice. He was that good, you know. He was the first person to discover the hieroglyphics of the Book of the Dead. and he translated it. But he did say that Mahaprabhu was Negro, but he wasn't a Negro. However, Beethoven biographers, we always see Beethoven with this big white hair, you know, I mean, and it's Hollywood makeup type. But his biographer used words such as black, Negro, Negro, and they were writing in the same age of Gaston Maspero. He was knighted by the British. He was that good, you know. He had 150 books in the New York Public Library, you know.
150?
Yeah, right. But he was stereotyping. In fact, he was one of those who said that Taharqa was stupid because he was trying to put a roof over his kiosk in the great court at Karnak Temple. All right. I mean, now he bought. Taharqa built 4 kiosks in Karnak Temple. I told you I did a 12-volume, 12-part series of Karnak Temple, and then I wrote the book of him. But he did one north, south, east, and west. The principal one, which is in the great court when you come into the temple, right? And it had 4 doors, 1, 2, north, south, east, west. And when Sophilinus Petrie wrote about this, right? He said, imagine that for the Ethiopians, that Egypt was the north. How far was the southern thought? That is to say that Ethiopia was not confined to the political boundaries we see today, but Ethiopia or Nubia may have extended all the way to South Africa. Right? Because if all of Egypt is just the north, then everything from southern Egypt's border, who knows how far back it went. But we gotta be careful of how the information is presented to us. For example, you mentioned Skip Gates. Right? He went to, he brought some artifacts out of West Africa that were hidden by Africans in the golden age of the Moors, before the slave trade, that was produced at the University of Sankore and Timbuktu and so forth. And he went to find the Jewish Ark, and he was he got to the building where it was supposed to be in Ethiopia, and he said, "Well, I'm here to see the Ark." People say, "You crazy?" The keepers, the Ark is not in Israel. Okay, it's believed that Sheba brought it out of Israel in ancient times. So I'm reading, some of you may remember this or know this, there was a newspaper called News of the World. And it was like a supermarket tabloid. And it was over there by the register. So when you're coming out, you could buy a copy of it, you know, it's one of these things. And there was an article I found interesting in that, we talked about 30 years ago, the article was entitled that British archaeologists have discovered the home of the Queen of Sheba, and they locate her in Nigeria. Ivan van Sertman said, well, what did that mean? That means that if her home was in Nigeria, it meant that her kingdom existed all the way across the Sudan into Ethiopia on the eastern side of the continent. right? So that as the story goes, that she went to Israel, and Solomon, who is slated to have had 600 concubines, he ran after this black woman. Okay, so he got lucky and all of that and stuff like that, right? But Van Sern was saying it wasn't really her beauty that motivated his interest. It was the power that she wielded. Okay, because if we agree with these modern British writers, and the sad thing is that they show you an image of the Queen of Sheba was a white woman. Alright, so now, Dr. Ben and Dr. Clark always, they differ on a number of things. They criticize each other. They love each other. The story is told about, I was in Egypt with Dr. Clark and Dr. Ben in 92 or 91, whatever. We were in that aborted aircraft that fell out of the sky.
You were on the aircraft? What did you say?
Yeah. Okay. So I was with some guys from Detroit, Bert Monroe and stuff like that. And Dr. Clark was there. Dr. Miller gave a lecture at Aswan, and we flew down to Cairo. And Dr. Monroe said, we went into the tomb of okay, how much time we got? Okay, what, 10 minutes?
15 till 10.
What time is it?
9:45, 15 till 10.
Okay. We went to tomb of Seti one of the great tombs. And Dr. Monroe wouldn't want to leave. So he said, okay, Monderson, lead us out. So now I let the group out, and they had about, I would say, 5,000 or 6,000 people outside in the sun. Can't get in because it's a narrow passageway. Right? And when I coming up, these people, they heap all kind of invective against him. So we got to Cairo, and he used to tell his wife, see, I lost my sight, not my mind, right? So he said to me, Dr. Monroe said, okay, Monderson, you wait till everybody's boarded the car, the plane, and then you bring up Dr. Clark. So I brought up Dr. Clark, and we sat in the engine. The plane took off and got about 300 or so feet, and it just fell back down. And so I will always say that if we went to heaven, he would be on my arm supporting him because he couldn't see, but he often said to his wife.
How many people were hurt in that?
Nobody. But the plane took off, and they're saying some kind of hydraulic problem. So it just dropped.
They shouldn't have taken off.
Well, that's besides the point, but we were part of that experience. So I was a part of the SETI 1 incident, and then there was another incident that I would not like to mention because it involved one of these contemporary people who did a heinous act and stuff like that. So I'm not going to get into that, but that's in the past. Okay, so I got a few minutes left. Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, just let me bring this to closure, right? Okay, so among similar scholars in anthropology, prehistory, even archaeology, who have studied the long, creative, formative periods that constructed Egyptian deep thought processes, Cephalus Petrie, the father of Egyptian archaeology, in an article entitled "Of Egyptian Religion," reminded the 17th dynasty coming from Nubia held Thebes as its capital. And let us recall, Randall McKee was two peoples, and the discovery of the kingship of Tarseti in Nubia. Much of this here was the groundswell that empowered Norma to form an armada with the rudiments of administrative practices, a viable military, theological thought, doctors to tend his sick soldiers, and stuff like that. And all of this comes from the south, not from the north. Right? So we're there left with recognizing the great creative minds of Egypt were from Upper Egypt, were originating in Central Africa, and therefore they were black. More important, however, given the high level of Egyptian intellectual creativity was without question formulated in the South or Upper Egypt. Conversely, when disaster struck, true dissolution of society, as in the intermediate periods, internecine struggles between petty aspirants to the throne, or downright invasions by foreign forces, it fell to the southern dynasts, such as from the fighting province of Wasset. These to restore unity and order, sustainability, and intellectual vigor to advance the culture. These unifiers, and I'm going to bring this to a close here now, these unifiers were Norma, Mentuhotep, Sekenenre, Tao, Kamos, and Amos, and later during the 25th dynasty, Kasha, Pianka, Shabaka, and Shahaka. It was scholars as Sheikh Antoniak, Theophilo Benga, Malana Karenga, Malefia Santi, J. Rogers, John Jassy, even Chancellor Williams and Ivan van Serpa, as well as Runoko Rashidi. Certainly Dr. Benjamin and Dr. Clark all would proclaim Egypt was a black civilization. So there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. I'll take your questions. I've got so much more, but I'm going to get into it.
Okay, anybody in the Zoom got a question for Dr. Monderson? Whew. Anybody in the Zoom? Going once? Going twice? Give Dr. Monderson a great big hand, y'all. He will be doing.
Thank you, Brother Monderson. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. Great.
He will be doing part 2. Dr. Lewis will be in 2 weeks, and then Monderson is coming back the week after that. So we want to thank everyone. You could view all the lectures from the BK History Club on YouTube. Just type in BK History Club. This lecture will be on YouTube tomorrow before maybe about 12. So give Dr. Monderson a great big hand.
Thank you.
Don't let what's happening, don't let what's happening put fear in anybody.
Really enjoyed the lecture. Thank you.
Yeah, great. Okay.
You can talk while we clean, while we shape up. I'm gonna cut the camera off, and you can have a little conference with Monderson if you like.
Okay.
You can have. You want the audience to hear, or you just want to talk to?
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Well.